So, what do you guys want to talk about? You're watching the High Spot Podcast, HSP, on the Give Us a Shot Network. Make sure you follow us on the YouTube, like, and subscribe so you get all the latest episodes of HSP. I am Jeff Martin alongside my tag team partner, the Trendsetter. Also, make sure you subscribe on all podcast platforms. That's right. If you can't watch us, listen to HSP on all versions of the podcast forms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc. You can find HSP right there. A tremendous weekend, Trendsetter, that we weren't even going to talk about Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, and then we had the UFC, and then we have Monday Night Raw. So much to discuss, but Trendsetter, it is good to have you here for another episode. What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? So we have a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff has happened over the weekend. A lot of things building towards Survivor Series War Games. Like you said, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, everything that's going on around the world of pro wrestling and entertainment as well. So looking forward to it, man.
Let's get right to it. Let's start off with Monday night, and of course, we'll work our way. We'll intervene. We'll do all these things here, but let's talk about the announcement finally that it looks like the first Raw on Netflix will be January 6th. At the Intuit Dome in Inglewood, California. We were there actually a couple of years ago before the building was even built. I mean, they were building it, but we were in SoFi for WrestleMania 39, and very impressive arena. And of course, it's going to be big time for WWE as they move to Netflix. Travis Scott will be there performing, so he'll be on hand. It's going to be a big night for WWE in general, though, and they go to TV14 trends that are TV14, moving away from the TV PG rating. So when you found out, we kind of knew that is going to be at the Intuit Dome. People were asking when tickets are going to be available. Well, they're available starting this week, so get your pre-sales and make sure that's going to be a hot ticket as Raw begins its 2025 in a new era on Netflix. But your thoughts in general, the excitement of this move to Netflix?
Listen, when it was first announced, there's definitely excitement in the air about the possibility of what was going to happen. Now that it was going to Netflix, going off the USA Network. And, I think, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show in terms of, can Netflix support this? Will we have any issues with the service? And the perfect examples was the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, where a lot of people complained about the service providing in terms of streaming issues. But it's still exciting from the moment it was announced and the level of what they can do creatively now where they're not being held within standards. And not saying that going to TV14 is going to now change their formula of what they do for success, but it does give them a little bit of freedom. So I think when I first found out they're going to Netflix, I thought, wow, now the shackles are off, per se. Not always a good thing, but sometimes I think in this case it would be, where now the creativity is not limited by what you can and cannot do, or worrying about, let's say, for example, how people will interpret it. The audience is going to be there. Netflix is known all around the world. Great deal. So excitement in the air in terms of, as we get closer to this date, what can we expect? And especially for the fact that we talked about this before. Remember when they moved from 3 to 2 hour format? And the flow of it seemed to be a little bit easier, but now with no commercials supposedly and things kind of just going all one way for 2 or 3 hours, we don't know if they're going to change the time duration. Definitely exciting to see what the potential might be there.
It's going to be 3 hours, and again, no commercials actually. So we're going to see a brand new style for them too. And I don't think a lot changes. I think, like you said, I just think the shackles are kind of taken off, and they're able to do a little bit more things. Of course, they still have sponsors to handle and talk to. So obviously, it's not going to be a major thing, but for certain angles, I think you can take that. I guess you can go a certain level now with these things. You can see some blood. You can see some, I guess, sexual innuendos or something like that. But I don't think anybody thinking, hallelujah, this Attitude Era again. I think you guys are not really getting it, because that was a whole different generation, obviously. And I don't want to sound old, but it was just different. It's not the same.
We're old, Jeff. That's the truth.
I think pushing it to the level, I don't think you're going to get that, but I think you're going to be a lot more flexibility as it comes to that. You talked about streaming issues and all that buffering. The much hated thing now in technology is that buffering, especially when you're streaming, you're downloading. And obviously, I had no idea this thing was going to be so big. We were talking about it because we thought, hey, we should talk about it on Friday night. It's going to be part of the show. A lot of people were talking about it at work, actually. And so I was like, let's discuss. 60 million people tuned in on Friday night to watch Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. I think we watched too because, hey, listen, it's part of the deal. It's there, so we should watch it and talk about it. But for all you people that thought that Mike Tyson was going to found the fountain of youth, I think it was just, you wanting to hang on to the nostalgia. But really, at the end of the day, it was what it was. And I'm not going to scream about it. I didn't have to pay for it. I just paid for the streaming service, but I didn't have to pay any extra out of my pocket. So it is what it was. And if you went there, fine. It was an event. It was a social thing to do. But you guys got to get that thing about Mike Tyson. If you guys thinking Mike Tyson was actually going to win this thing, I just didn't see it.
I think there's optimism there, hoping that Tyson could knock Jake Paul out. I mean, let's be honest. I think that's a majority of why people wanted to tune into this, because going off of what happened in his exhibition fight with Roy Jones, Mike looked pretty good. Now take him away from there. He's obviously only getting older at this point, and that's why they say Father Time is undefeated for a reason. Where even though it was a lengthy time off from his last exhibition fight, that's what this was. It was an exhibition fight. It wasn't really a real fight, but at the same time, you could tell that Tyson didn't have look like the ability where, yeah, his mind wanted to do things, but his body definitely wasn't answering the call. And you could definitely tell Jake, too, was playing it safe, as well he should have, because early in that first round, it looked like Mike got him a couple times. And if you're smart, you don't want to keep taking that type of punishment or run the risk of that happening to you. So all in all, it was what it was. That's how I usually say it sometimes. There's nothing in terms of anything surprising that happened. Production wise, they did a really good job, besides the buffering issues, which is something that, let's be honest, too, this is the new day and age we're dealing with nowadays, with Raw moving to Netflix, and you deal with, Peacock and other streaming platforms like Max, Showtime, what Paramount's trying to do. Those things are going to be an issue. Now, this would be a scenario too where it was the first time experiment for boxing to be on, I mean, if you want to call it boxing to be on Netflix. I don't know if they're going to do that anytime soon again as the train goes by for some weird reason, only at this time. And yeah, so I think ultimately it was what it was, but it was entertaining in the sense that people, if you paid money to expect another result, then you kind of were wasting your time there. So that's what it was.
So a lot of things there. I think that everyone that's had their little smart ass remarks about, oh, WWE, careful what you're getting in bed with Netflix. So I don't think 60 million people are going to go watching Monday Night Raw on six as much as you'd like to think. I don't think they're going to have that much traffic that at that time. So I don't think it's going to be something that crazy that they're going to have to worry about. So that's one thing to ease your fears, WWE fans, WWE Universe. And as far as the fight, hey, listen. Right, you said it too, because you're more of a boxing person than I am and know more about the fighting and MMA scene. The last thing to go in a fighter is their punch, right, and their power. So you were kind of hoping that if anything Tyson was going to win, it was going to be with a punch. But then you see all the stuff that's going on with the contracts and how if Tyson didn't, if he knocked out Paul in the first round, he wouldn't get paid or stuff like that. So I'm not sure the validity of those things, but it makes you wonder one thing, Trendsetter, before we move on. Was this to you scripted or staged? And if it was, did you have a problem with it? Me personally, I did not have a problem with it because you said the E word, exhibition. So this was more of a show. And if you're watching WWE and you're watching something like this, hey, if it's scripted, fine, let it be. But to think if it was anything more than a really my two numbers are this 58 and 28, right? Tyson's like 58, Jake Paul's 27, 28. That was the big factor here. You can talk about scripted or not. This was an exhibition, and while it kind of leans to maybe there was kind of something going on where there was like a acknowledgement towards the end that, hey, let's just get out of this safe, let's go home safe. Scripted to me, maybe.
Yeah, listen, I'll leave it with this, though. Whether it be scripted or staged, like you said, in this scenario, who really cares? Maybe for those who were betting on it, maybe those who were expecting something different from watching all the film of Mike Tyson training and thinking, man, this guy still has speed. He still has the ability of doing it. It's one thing training for certain rounds when it's manageable. It's different when you're actually there and the lights are bright. Not to say that Mike isn't used to that, but like I said before, sometimes the brain wants to do something and the body just doesn't follow for whatever reason. Plus, he's wearing a knee brace. So maybe he was dealing with an injury because, again, at 50 years old, injuries when you're training that hard and vicious like Mike Tyson was for this. And I'm not going to take anything away from him in terms of getting ready and prepared because he looked in tremendous shape for his age. Yeah, I don't think anybody was expecting anything differently. You got what you wanted. You got what you paid for. The only thing is the difference in terms of whether it be scripted or some other thing was colluded where like you mentioned the contract, right? You at least wanted to make it look competitive, and for the most part it wasn't. After the first round, Mike was just standing there and Jake Paul was just circling around the ring, giving him punches, some good punches that he took, and that's what it was. You like to give the illusion as if it's something might happen, but at that point it wasn't. Mike was just standing there. Whether he was injured or whether he wanted the payday, we'll never know. We can make speculation on it, but ultimately, like I said in the beginning, it was what it was.
Don't feel bad for Mike. Mike got paid. He got his $20 million, so don't feel sad for Mike Tyson because he's going home a very happy man. Now, going to the legitimacy of things, UFC 309 in our backyard in Madison Square Garden. We got to cover these one of these days, Trendsetter. Got to get the ball rolling on that because that was actually fun to see Madison Square Garden, see the return of Jon Jones against Stipe Miocic. And hey, is he the greatest of all time before we move on? Because obviously now it sets up some potential dream matches, but he's got some FU money to fight one of the major guys. He wants to now take on established guys instead of up and comers because he doesn't want to have a name made after it for him. Is he the greatest of all time, just in general? Before we move on.
Yeah, to answer your question, yeah, no doubt about it. The Jon Jones is without a question the best, and they use this expression a lot in sports in general, the best pound for pound fighter in mixed martial arts today. And like you said, to your point, he's now at this stage of his career. The days of fighting are dwindling, I feel, for Jon Jones, because I feel like when you move up to heavyweight now, there's no other room for him to come back down to 215. Doesn't make a lot of sense for him to come down to a lower weight class. As we all know, as we get older, it gets more difficult to lose weight. And ultimately, it's now for legacy. It's for legacy for Jon Jones. And maybe 1-2 more fights are left, or maybe none. He's made it well known as he discusses negotiations, Jeff, with the UFC, that if he doesn't get what he wants, which, despite what I want to think about Jon Jones personally in terms of the decisions he's made outside of the octagon, fair point there, but he's earned it. He has been literally competing and defending his title, whether it be the light heavyweight title, in this case now the heavyweight title. So at this stage right now, he's willing to walk away from anything. So this might have been his last fight. And what a historic event at Madison Square Garden for UFC 309. So I think we'll get one more out of him, because I think if the UFC wants to make money, they'll make the fight between Jon Jones and Alexander Pereira, who is the current light heavyweight champion. So I think that might be a possibility. If it's not, then I think Jon Jones walks off into the sunset.
You want to give Tom Aspinall, I guess, the glory or the chance to make a name off of him, or else he have paid a lot of money. But I think everyone has a price, and I think Dana wants that fight. And obviously, I don't know how to take Jon Jones seriously as far as he has that respect for Dana. Will he have that price to do it? Because I don't know. Other than that, what else would get a guy like Jon Jones motivated than to shut this young guy up, to Tom Aspinall there, and maybe then just go out that way, go out on top, go out and be that dude, and we'll see what happens. But that Alex Pereira, it'd be a lot. I don't think, and Dana was saying how like he didn't want to kill any buzz Alex has, because he's on a trajectory level on his own to do that to him and weight disparity in the wrestling too. I don't think he would want to do that to him. Hey, listen, it's up for grabs, but it's good for discussion. It's good for discussion. It's good for the sport and UFC. And again, setting records, UFC 309. We even had the president-elect there too. So it's a very, very interesting weekend as far as non-wrestling things related. You could say sports entertainment too, because it's all entertaining stuff. So we had Friday Night SmackDown, and the ratings kind of showed that a lot of people were tuning into the Tyson Paul thing, and it really had one of its not so ideal ratings. I think a 1.23, but still on all, even though with Roman in the Bloodline, you're a little surprised at that rating. But the main thing that I got out of SmackDown, Trendsetter, is that the Wiseman's not answering. And whether it's because the cell phone is broken, which I find it hard to believe that would stop a businessman like Paul Heyman, whether he's ignoring Roman Reigns, whether he's aligned himself with another member of that bloodline. That is the story. And we talked about it last episode, how this storyline was kind of a little maybe getting to, not repetitive, but it was kind of getting a little dull. Well, SmackDown, to me, reignited my interest in this, because this little plot twist of the Wiseman has got me thinking now of all these different options for Survivor Series. And what does it have you leaning towards, Trendsetter? Because I believe that the Wiseman could be leaning to someone other than Roman Reigns.
Yeah, well, that's the message they want to get across. That's the message they delivered, and what we're talking about now. I have to be honest with you, and I'll talk 1 second about the Wiseman scenario, but really, when you've looked at this version of Roman Reigns coming back, he had the impression where he made that promo after a lengthy time away and went to the ring. Now, he had come back prior, but never really spoke publicly to the audience, and then finally saying, to the extent that a lot of things have changed, but he's still the same, he's not changing. But it's weird to see that dynamic now where you looked at the version of Roman Reigns before WrestleMania 40. He was, although his world might have been spinning around in terms of the pressure of being the champion, but still he had his cohesion, his people with him. Now it seems like chaos for him right now, and it also makes one think in terms of the storyline. Now that we're talking about it, really it seems like the whole brains behind the whole operation was quote unquote the wise man, and for him to call the wise man and that number to be disconnected. Does the wise man feel personal animosity that his tribal chief wasn't there to protect him? Does he want nothing part of it because he's afraid of what Sol Sikoa and his bloodline might do? Or to your extent, too, there might be somebody else he might be leaning towards. And we saw it when Roman Reigns teamed up with Cody Rhodes, that there's another member of the family that's not happy with Roman. So a lot of chaos. I think the story has kind of dragged a little bit, leaning towards Survivor Series War Games, which we'll dissect the closer we get to it before the show starts in terms of promoting that event. But man, just when you think you kind of figured it out, it's getting dull, it's actually getting pretty interesting now. So I'm actually looking forward to see where the wise man falls in all of this, where his loyalty lasts.
So we know Bronson Reed is the fifth member, and obviously I did not until watching SmackDown saw how it fit, but it fits. I mean, he's the push that Bronson Reed has gotten the last few months has been amazing. This is a guy that was doing nothing, and now is like in the bloodline angle, and it works. Imagine him and Jacob Fatu as a tag team.
Oh, don't even want to think about that right now.
That is, I would love to see that. Give them a tag team title run. That would be one of the most dominant tag teams ever, I believe. I mean, that is just power plus power, and I think it just fits. So then the other question is now going to be, as we talk about Raw in just a few minutes, is whether Seth Rollins will eventually join the OG Bloodline or it could be somebody else. But before we get to that, though, a few more things that happened is Sami Zayn. Now, I think a lot of us like to see these Easter eggs and kind of now gotten to the point where like we're analyzing everything. But there's a point where they're looking at the TV before Solo comes out, and Sami pulls something out of his pocket, and we posted that, and we had a lot of people chiming in. Yeah. Our Instagram, they were saying, "Bro, that's a remote, bro. He's just the remote." It could have been a remote control. Thought it was a cell phone, maybe. I thought it was a cell phone, and they were saying, "Oh, well, he's he don't want to get his cell phone destroyed before he goes in there for a fight." Okay, but I mean, that's just to me that was a little Easter egg that I was asking to myself: Are we overblowing it? Are we looking for anything now, or can Sami Zayn be trusted in this bloodline angle?
Dude, you bring up a great question here, which I'm sure a lot of people, when they saw that, whether it's intended or not, let's be honest, Jeff, when we've looked back at this new regime, and the things we've seen, like when people are doing interviews backstage or little subtleties, we're picking it up more often because we realize it's part of the story. Now, could it lead to nothing? Yeah, there's always that possibility, right? But it doesn't really seem that W placed on TV. It wasn't. One perfect example, too. Remember the hotel room key that Finn Balor grabbed away from the table, and we all thought maybe it was just trying to be sleight of hand again, getting rid of it, and it was part of the story. In this scenario, I think there's something to be said there too, because we talked about it weeks ago. Even last week, we said where this whole storyline of the bloodline seems to be dragging to a certain extent, right? But also seems pretty predictable what we're going to see. Now, with Jay, we know he's established in terms of the fans love him. Jimmy, people are questioning Jimmy coming back. His allegiance is to Roman Reigns, always has been. Now he has this kind of face turn a certain way, but he hasn't really changed his character, so now people are questioning that. The questions really lie in Roman Reigns' version of the bloodline, not Solo Sikoa's. So in the scenario that you said there, where he has a phone on him, something's going on, it could lead to the fact that, to your point, can Sami be trusted? To me, listen, I've loved Sami Zayn when he's come back and he had that resurgence and people were cheering for him. But now I think it's time where things might need to change a little bit for Sami, because let's be honest, without this bloodline storyline angle is going on, there really has been much for him besides his run for the Intercontinental title against Gunther. So I think right now, if there's any time for a change to happen, I think this might be the Easter eggs of something with Sami Zayn leading in the future.
Very true. And I also think that if anyone could pull off, it's Sami, because Sami still has a lot of beef with Roman. I mean, that Royal Rumble thing is still, I mean, it's still there. I mean, that's going to happen, and then Roman Reigns beating him at Elimination Chamber in his hometown in Montreal. Talking to his wife and throwing that in, and really, talking smack in front of his wife and family too. So that's got to be leaning. It's just not that easy to me. I get it because he's really friends with Jay, but to me, the being able to bury the hatchet so quick with Roman Reigns to me is just a little puzzling to me. How quickly he can do that, because there's a lot of animosity there too, which I believe just can't be just put away like that. So we'll see what Sammy does, but that's going to be interesting to me. I don't think we can not look past that. We can't look past that cell phone, because I think it's going to be key, I think, leading into Survivor Series, which is actually next week, believe it or not. We're toward the end of November, Thanksgiving. It's crazy, crazy time how fast it goes. So now, Trendsetter, we have that. We have that going on. Then the return of Shinsuke Nakamura, which all I'm going to say is this. I hope that they really have something in this feud with LA Knight, if that's going to be LA Knight's next opponent for the U.S. Championship. I'm really pulling for Shinsuke because it's almost going to be almost 10 years, maybe closer to 8, 9 years that he's been now with the company. Time flies, right? And they still haven't gotten it right. I don't know if this version of Nakamura is the right version of Nakamura. I don't know if they'll ever figure him out, which is puzzling to me. But I really hope that it's a good run for Shinsuke, because he's one of the guys that when he first came to WWE and there was that news that he was coming over from Japan, I was like, wow, this is a can't miss guy. And for some reason, it's just been miss with this guy. And I really hope at the end of the day, he gets a good run, because if anyone deserves it, it really is Shinsuke Nakamura.
Yeah, I mean, listen, initially at the beginning, I thought the same way you did when it came to Shinsuke Nakamura, hit or miss, and this time I was like, complete miss. But when I look back at the things he has done since coming up from NXT, right? Now, granted, I completely understand in terms of it's still not the way people wanted it to happen. Completely agree. But it did, because you look at the track record, his moment at the Royal Rumble, his moment at WrestleMania, headlining WrestleMania with AJ Styles, call it what you will, wasn't the last match on the card, but still was for the WWE Championship. And this also new version of Shinsuke Nakamura, where he was speaking more in his native tongue. He had subtitles underneath, which I thought was really a cool side of him. Have they all ended up being well? No, they've all flopped toward the end. But he's had moments, not the moments I'm sure a lot of fans wish he had, but he has had moments. This version of Shinsuke Nakamura, I just hope that this is a version that has more longevity. My biggest concern with Shinsuke is that he comes back now after a long sabbatical, and now he's in a rivalry. Now it's going to be with LA Knight for the U.S. title. Let's say he doesn't win that one. Let's say it's not going to be a one and done. They're going to go into a series of matches. Even if he wins the title or doesn't win the title, there has to be long-term storytelling, of course, but planning. I feel sometimes when they lose the momentum with a guy like Shinsuke Nakamura, they're like, okay, well, we'll now just leave you in the mid-card, and you'll be losing a lot of matches to people. And again, we talked about wins and losses before in the past too. It doesn't matter that you win and lose, just the manner in which you do it. And the perception would be that, oh, he's just now going to be in the jobber category towards the end. I just don't want that to happen. So whatever version of Shinsuke Nakamura we're seeing now, which seems to be even a darker version than his last run when he was trying to, take Cody Rhodes' story and finish his at WrestleMania. I just wish there's more longevity, more planning for this too, because even though whether he wins the U.S. title or not, depending on what happens with his rivalry now that's going to be with LA Knight, just don't want him to get lost in the shuffle again. That's my biggest concern.
And that's, I think, everybody's concern who's a fan of Shinsuke, because just like you mentioned, what's next, I guess, is probably the easiest thing to say, is if he doesn't succeed in vying for that U.S. championship against LA Knight, which I don't think he will. I think there's just another opponent for LA Knight. It's what's next for Shinsuke. He's at least owed that, in my opinion, because of just the tremendous superstar that he is. Bayley is the first person to qualify and advance the Women's United States Championship. Really good for her. I think she would be a good, credible champion. Obviously, we were talking about that before, and you'd like to see somebody else maybe represent the U.S. Championship. So we'll see what happens with that. And then we find out, of course, the women's War Games match, which we'll talk about and becomes really official on Monday Night Raw. Still, I think the match is going to be great, but I just don't think that the storyline heading into it was at all, I think, given enough time. I get it. This other storyline with the War Games has really taken over, so I get it. But we'll see. The women are going to deliver. We'll get more into that when we talk about Raw. And of course, Tommaso Ciampa, who's showing shades of his NXT Tommaso Ciampa. He's definitely on a different trajectory than, or at least a different game plan than Johnny Gargano, and that's going to come to head and see if they can get it together. So all in all, it was a very good SmackDown Trendsetter, which leads us now to Monday Night Raw. And again, talking about that women's that women's Survivor Series match at War Games, Rhea Ripley's back, and she will be there. So now the stage is set. So with everything that came to be on Monday Night Raw, and Rhea, I think, is a team player here. She's gutting it out because she's got that face guard there. She obviously has the effects of the orbital injury that, of course, were at the hands of Liv and Raquel. Is this, to you, do you think is going to be a match that delivers, or do you wish you would have told a story, or does it even matter because we're going to get a good match?
I think it doesn't matter. I think we're just going to get a good match out of it. It looks like it was put together last minute. A lot of pieces that needed to be put in place quickly to equivalate the fact that we're going to get a men's War Games match. They want to put the women in that spotlight as well, understandably so. I just don't think from a storyline standpoint that I'm invested in it. I mean, let's be honest. The real main focal points are Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. And ultimately, this isn't done with them. So what do? You put them in a scenario where now Rhea can get her hands on Liv, or ultimately could get one over on her in the team aspect here, which leads and continues the storyline. So I think all the other pieces in place are just placeholders. No offense to anyone, not trying to offend anybody, but they're just placeholders to build up the story, continuing with Rhea and Liv Morgan. And my biggest concern really is all this, really, for the fact that you had Rhea Ripley injure her shoulder, which would made Liv and brought her up to a whole other level. Sometimes, you never wish for an injury, but sometimes they're blessings in disguise, for the fact in this case for Liv, right? And now she comes back, she gets injured or has some injuries. So now I'm a little bit more concerned. Like, do you really want to put Rhea in this type of situation? Like, she's your cash cow. You re-signed her. When you look at Rhea Ripley, she is money, right? Do you really want to put her in the scenario here where, you want it to be an entertaining match, but you don't want to have these crazy, scary spots where somebody's going to get hurt? So that's my main concern of all of it too. How, you tell me, Jeff. I mean, I've looked online. How legitimate is the orbital injury? Is it more just dealing with
the orbital injury is legit, and it's something that the timetable is they're hoping for to be back before Mania.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the prognosis is on something like that, but this to me is a little early. And I thought they weren't going to have a match. I thought it was just not going to happen because of Rhea Ripley's injury. Because what really would have been the point of having a match there with no Rhea Ripley? It kind of would have not had as much luster. The only question I have about this is, like, the men's War Games, it does have I guess, what happens next to the aspect, like, what is the ramifications? There's huge ramifications. But after the War Games women's match, I don't think there's really a lot of I guess there's really nothing crazy where the odds are so stacked that, like, or something where, like, something's going to happen, in this matchup that's important to win. You know what I mean? I think it's just more it's more to me just like a match to have a match, and who's victorious, who's just the better. At the end of all, it's all individual feuds, and I don't think there's any ramifications or anything that's going to be solved that night.
Yeah, real quick. This is what I think is going to happen. In terms of ramifications, you're comparing it to the Bloodline storyline. There's no comparison. They're apples and oranges, right? Or fruits and vegetables. They're that opposite of each other. I think it's gonna try to help a couple of things here. It's gonna try to help Io Sky. I think right now they're looking at trying to separate her from Damage Girl to a certain extent. They want her to be that single star as a babyface right now. I think that's the direction they're trying to go. I think they're trying to create some tension between the tag team champions because they also are in the Women's United States tournament too. And we've had scenarios where Jade and Bianca have kind of stare each other down, thinking, okay, this might happen down the road, maybe sooner than later, starting to create tension within that. I also think with Candice LeRae, I think is also trying to showcase her. I think she might shine a little bit in this match. Look out for her as being a sleeper because now that she doesn't have Indy Hartwell with her, she was more pitted as a team type of thing. See what we can do with her. So I think it's really going to be those things that I'm going to be looking at in this match. We already know what the ramifications are. It's all about Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. So where these other storylines start building up from this particular match, I think that's what's going to lead into after Survivor Series, and leading into obviously Royal Rumble into WrestleMania.
Obviously, you're right, and obviously there's still that chance that Tiffany has a chance to maybe perhaps cash that in at Survivor Series. Duly noted, well point, by the way, too. It is more individual ramifications and more of the storyline that's building to, and you broke it down tremendously. And also, too, again, can Liv Morgan and a person like Nia Jax, can their egos get along as well? But that Tiffany Stratton one is one to watch because she can cash that in at Survivor Series, which would be really cool. 3 matches so far for the Survivor Series right now. If it stands at that, you get the men's Survivor Series match with OG Bloodline versus the Bloodline. You get the women's Survivor Series War Games match, and then you get Gunther versus Damian Priest. So 3 matches, Trendsetter. Probably one more where they're kind of teasing a triple threat between Sheamus, Kaiser, Ludwig Kaiser, and Braun Breaker because of the outside interference by Ludwig Kaiser. So 4 matches. The typical norm for this is 5. Do you think we'll get to 5?
I think so. I think there has to be something there with Cody and Kevin Owens, I feel. There needs to be something there.
And then also, too, I would have to say is that CM Punk is scheduled to be at Survivor Series. Do you think at all? I mean, it would make sense because this is going to be the 1-year anniversary where obviously probably the best moment of 2023 happened with CM Punk returning at Survivor Series. So that is definitely something we need to keep an eye on. It makes sense that possibly the next opponent for Gunther or Damian Priest is going to be CM Punk.
Yeah, and I don't think we see CM Punk in terms of interfering in anything. I just think it'll be a scenario where whoever comes out victorious in the Gunther Damian Priest match, which we'll break down next week, is going to be next in line for CM Punk. So that's what I feel. In terms of Drew McIntyre, we can talk more about that next week too. But again, he's been off TV for a while as well. But it's funny how I think last week we spoke about rosters, right? And like we spoke about NXT and the women's roster being so deep. And you look at this roster for Raw or SmackDown. I mean, these are problems you like to have, right? You like to have talent on the sideline just waiting to get used and waiting where they fit in because it's exciting. And it also creates more longevity, not just for the health of the superstar or the wrestler, but in terms of the story and allowing it to kind of play itself out right now, which is what we're getting. I mean, guys, you wanted long-term storytelling. You're getting it right now.
Trendsetter has storms on the mind, long-term storytelling. You're getting it in WWE. Go, you mentioned Drew McIntyre, Trendsetter. Drew McIntyre.
List. I'm sorry.
McIntyre, again, waiting on him to show up. Obviously, will be there before the premiere on Netflix. And then also, two Trendsetter, people that are on the sidelines is Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch was in a recent interview and mentioned that she's not retired. As much as Liv Morgan likes to say that she retired her, she's not going to get the last vision of her with Dominic Mysterio. That's not going to be her final hurrah. She will be back, and like I said, she definitely will be back by the time that Raw goes to Netflix. You take a look at this loaded women's division. Hey, I mean, it only makes it better.
On Charlotte Flair too.
The way on Charlotte. By the time we get to Mania, this will probably be, and knock on wood that everyone's healthy because everyone's that should be everybody coming back, is going to be a loaded women's division heading into WrestleMania. And like I said, maybe one person's owed one of the main events there at WrestleMania, maybe none of them, but it is going to be a very impressive women's division once you get the man and you get Charlotte Flair back in the fold.
Yeah, listen, it's a problem you love to have if you're somebody in creative like Triple H right now, but it's also a horrible nightmare as well because there's just not enough spots for everybody. I mean, let's be honest. Becky Lynch coming back, that's dangerous in terms of whether you're the women's world champion or the women's WWE champion. And with CM Punk returning, and who knows what's going on with Drew McIntyre when he'll return, whether it be Damian Priest, King of the Streets as they call himself, or the Ring General Gunther, it leaves it wide open. And who knows, at the end of the whole War Game scenario too, it also the big question mark is not only about Bronson Reed, who's done an amazing job of being considered now a player in the main event slot right now, and kudos to creative and Triple H for doing that because, as you said in the beginning, he really isn't doing much. And now Seth Rollins, He's still out there. Seth Rollins and CM Punk. Where does that happen if it does happen? So yeah, a lot of possibilities here. And again, it's a dream and a nightmare for most, because you have to position these in the sense where it makes sense, I guess, at a certain point. But again, logic gets thrown out the window when we talk about pro wrestling. But it's exciting because we're building that slow build towards WrestleMania, and it's got me excited, man. Besides the Hershey commercial with the doing all the things for the holiday season, WrestleMania, before you know it, Royal Rumble will be right around the corner. As cliche as that sounds, and then that's where we're going to be like, wow, look at all the options. What's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? It's exciting time right now.
It's a fantasy booker's dream, and we are heading towards 2025. 2024 is almost over, which is crazy to say that we will be in Royal Rumble season before you know it. And then, like we were talking about, Becky Lynch is coming back, Charlotte Flair is coming back to SmackDown. Then you're gonna have the huge Raw on Netflix, where you're gonna have the who's who are gonna be advertised there. You got Roman Reigns, John Cena, Cody Rhodes, and it also begins the John Cena farewell tour.
Yeah, we haven't even talking about that right now.
Going to be so much in 2025, and like I said, there's still so much going on now. So that is going to be interesting. And then I guess the focal point that we were trying to get to is, at the end of the day, we had Bronson Reed and Seth Rollins, and obviously Solo Sikoa gets involved. And now, Trendsetter, as much as Seth Freakin Rollins has said, no, I'm not going to team up with Roman Reigns. I'm not going to give that tyrant any opportunity here. I get it. I'll do it for you, Jimmy, Jay, and Sammy, but not for Roman Reigns. This feud, which is everyone is kind of begging for, which is like has been dormant for like the last couple of years now, could it be boiling once again heading into the Survivor Series, with Seth Freakin Rollins accepting that position with the Bloodline? Because that, and especially too, celebrating 12 years of the Shield just a few days ago, could this be something that could be just too good to pass up for Seth Freakin Rollins to get his chance to get his hands on Bronson Reed in a cage and set all that aside just for that and work with Roman Reigns? Which is crazy to me that Roman Reigns is that desperate to have a guy like Seth Freakin Rollins in the OG Bloodline. So at the end of the day, because we did not find out on Raw, does Seth Freakin Rollins join the OG, or do we get somebody else? And if so, who?
To answer your question, it's Seth Rollins. In retrospect, does it make any sense? Absolutely not. It doesn't. If his only reason is to get his hands on Bronson Reed, then to me, listen, I've been such a fan of WWE in terms of everything they've been doing right now. But this one I just don't understand, and I don't get. There really is no reasoning behind it. For everything that Seth Rollins has said, for the history between him and Roman Reigns that has continued for a very long time, and again, it's right there if they want to use it. Depends on when they're going to use it between Seth and Roman. I'm sure a lot of fans are anticipating, waiting for that to happen one day. I don't know why you join forces with him. And this is funny because these are the same individuals, like a Sammy or a Seth Rollins, which say, why would Cody join forces with Roman when Roman's made his life a living hell, as he's been finishing his story, and it happened in 2 years in terms of a hellish life for Cody Rhodes. And now for Seth to even have a longer history with Roman, and for that stuff to happen, I don't know how you could do it. I guess the old expression goes, you keep your enemies close and you keep your friends close, your enemies even closer. But this makes no sense to me why Seth would join. On paper-wise, looks good. You know their history in the Shield, but for these two to see eye to eye from a character standpoint, for these two alphas to want to kind of share the ring together, and again, we talked about Sammy being a question mark. Seth's a question mark. Roman's a question mark. Jamie's a question mark. Jay, I don't know what he is, but you know. Yeah, exactly. He's a yeet. That's what he is.
So the thing to me is, though, the more cohesive unit heading into Survivor Series right now is Solo Sikoa and the Bloodline. Yeah. They're more cohesive. They're more joined. There's a lot of friction, like you mentioned, with the OG Bloodline. Roman Reigns, while he is kind of the leader, he's kind of lost control a little bit here, because now he's at the mercy of having to have a guy like Seth Freakin Rollins save the OG Bloodline. That is going to be an interesting dynamic, and like I said, it could lead to a tease of friction between Seth and Roman, which is the most dormant. it's like the volcano, right? That's dormant for years because and as soon as it erupts, it's gonna you're gonna have this eruption. This is the feud here that has not been touched since that Royal Rumble back in St. Louis, I believe, where Seth dressed up as he had the Shield attire and everything like that, and he came out, and then Roman Reigns just goes crazy on him with the steel chairs, right? And then you get Roman Reigns attacking Seth with the chair at WrestleMania, choosing to hit him because he still can't get over what he did to the Shield, right? Still holding the animosity, costing him basically WrestleMania 40. And now this feud that could be so money, man, is to the point where it's that spark, it's going to fuse, and that volcano is going to erupt soon. And I think that's what we're getting to. That's what it's getting to. This, you talk about long-term storytelling, Trendsetter. This has been over like at least 3-4 years, or even since Seth turned on the Shield. This has been a very long-term storytelling. I can't even say now. You got me tongue-tied. This is a long-term storytelling angle that WWE has in their pocket that they can use at any time, and it's going to be money.
It's going to be money. I mean, it's bleeding green right now, honestly, and we'll dissect it more next week. But I ultimately look at this, and I'm assuming it's going to be in the main event. It should be the main event. Who has more to lose? You could tell who has more to lose, but if you individually separate this, and again, we'll talk about this next week, there's a reason I could find for every single member of this match on Roman's side to want to be involved in it. It's hard for me to find a reason for Seth Rollins. If it's going to be Bronson Reed, I don't know. It's hard for me to swallow that pill.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, unless he's gonna unless him and Sammy are plotting something, or at least he's going in there to at least screw Roman over. Maybe just go after Bronson and then just leave or something like that, or just have them brawl all over or find a way to that it's just on them and that's all his focus is on. Maybe that's how they get away with it. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's how he's going to try to get it. But man, I'm pretty sure the crowd is going to go crazy when you have Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, whether it's a tag, whether it's they bump into each other or something like that, or Seth's got to make a save, or Roman's got to make a save. That is going to be something that the fans are going to go crazy about, and let the speculation begin of when that feud begins, because that is definitely one that we're going to see down the road. And of course, the Rock still, where is the Rock involved in all this? So we will dissect that in our Survivor Series preview next week. Now, guys, so before we close the show, just let you know, on a show note, we'll be back this week. We will preview Full Gear, which comes to you this weekend from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. So we'll have our Full Gear preview, and we'll talk about SmackDown as well. So lots going on, especially in NXT as well, as they prepare for NXT Deadline. They had Zarya, they had Stephanie Vaquer, and they had Nathan Frazier advance in the Iron Survivors Challenge. So they're set for Deadline as well. More qualifying matches to come next week. Julia will be involved as well. So Trendsetter, I mean, it just keeps getting busy and busy, but we want to thank you guys, the fans of here, the HSP podcast, for joining us every time here on the Give It a Shot Network. Make sure you listen to us on all podcast platforms. Make sure you like and subscribe here. Hit the notification bell on the Give It a Shot Network so you don't miss a second of the High Spot podcast here, talking about everything pro wrestling, MMA, and sports entertainment. Trendsetter, we will be back with you later on this week. But man, what a week it was to recap, Trendsetter, and I will leave it to you to close this episode of HSP.
Guys, you've been listening to us. We are the Just Wrecking Crew for my tag team partner, Jeff Martin. I'm the Trendsetter, Brian Berga. This is HSP, as you know it, guys. And we do this for one reason and one reason only. We do this for you, the crew.
See you this week, boys.